I was brought up here, you know, lived on the river most of my life, and then I moved away and moved back again recently. And the great thing about this bit of river is that I know every inch of the riverbed almost, like an old friend, and that's what you need to get to do, that once you find a bit of river that you're going to fish, get to know it as well as you can. Let's just have a walk downstream. I'm just going to put my Polaroids on. I know these look a bit silly in the middle of winter, but you can see so much with Polaroids, even when the water's coloured. You might not be able to see down on the deck where the barbel are, but sometimes there's a submerged snag or a lighter bit of riverbed that's very shallow, and with these on you'll see it. If you've got your naked eyes, you've got too much glare to be able to see things like that. Anyway, we'll carry on. It's quite an interesting area just here, because what you've got behind me is a very smooth glide. You can see how the water's unbroken there, and that could hold fish almost anywhere along its length. You could catch fish anywhere from a third to halfway to 3/4 across the river in a swim like that. It's the sort of swim, though, that you'll need to bait up and draw fish to you. It's not what I'd term an obvious area. There's nowhere in that particular swim, with the water being so smooth, that tells you, ah, that's where the fish are going to be. Let's see if we can find a crease, because I like creases. This is a nice looking swim. This is a crease. I don't know whether you can see what I mean, but look at where the bush is in the water down there, and the way the water just curls away from the edge of it. And behind that you can see almost a back eddy. It's not quite a back eddy, but you've got a nice area of steady water under the bank, and that indicates to me that that water's deep there. It curls off the tree, some slacker water inside, and in a real flood the fish are going to be right on the edge of that crease, right close into the edge of the river. So that's the sort of swim I'd go for if the river was really quite high and very, very coloured. In the upstream area there's a crease because this tree is in the water, and you can see the little curls of water coming off the branches and the smoother area created down the inside, because that's what a crease is. It's an area of water caused by an obstruction. It could be a tree in the water, it could be a sloping riverbank, but where you see that diagonal crease of water between fast and steadier water, that's what we call a crease, and it's a food carrier. And the way the barbel position themselves will vary according to the height of the river. Just look at this swim in a little bit more detail. It's steady down the inside, and when the water's very high, the barbel are going to be here, tucked right underneath this bank in the steady water. But the lower the river drops, the further out towards the actual crease of water, the division between the fast and the steady, that's where the barbel will actually be. But there's another good thing about this swim. Come on, let's just get down here, because we haven't seen all of this swim yet. The reason I like this one so much is this. As well as that crease of steady water, just look at that. You've got an overhanging tree. I'll tell you what, there's probably chub in this swim as well, and I wouldn't mind betting later on that if I tried a cast or two here, I probably would catch a chub. But it's super, this. You've got the crease, you've got the depth. I know from experience this swim's about 8 foot deep under the bank, which is super. Nice clean bottom, I know that too. And you've got the overhanging trees, which give the barbel a little bit more shelter and cover if the river drops even further. So this is the sort of swim that could produce a fish under any conditions. We're going to wander back to my own swim now, the one I'm fishing today, and I'm going to tell you why I like that one so much. So I'll see you back there. Well, here we are by the famous old oak tree. Beautiful old tree, this. I'll tell you what, this tree's nearly as old as our cameraman. Well, it's getting on a bit. This is quite a famous swim, as I've just indicated. It's reasonably well known down here at Hampton Lode, and it does hold a number of barbel, both in the summer and the winter. What I like about this swim, and what I like about winter barbel fishing, as you've probably gathered, is these creases. The creases are good because they, in my experience, hold lots of barbel, and the best way to approach fishing them is to try and fish baits along the crease, usually upstream fishing, towards where the crease begins to deviate out from the bank. Where you put the bait depends on the height of the river. If it's very high, you've got to fish inside the crease, because otherwise your bait just gets dragged out of position. When the river drops, it's best to try and position baits right on the crease, i.e. the division between the fast water and the slow water, as I mentioned before. This swim's got a very pronounced crease running from inside the bank created by a gantry further upstream. And it forces the flow across the river, so about a third of the way out, the water changes pace. It's quite speedy down the middle, but down the edge, it's reasonably smooth and reasonably steady flowing. So generally speaking, I'll try and fish baits along the crease by upstream ledgering. But when it comes to down here, there's one or two other interesting areas. The banks in this area are quite undercut actually, so when the river's quite high, the barbel can tuck in right into this marginal area here, just below the tree. And you'll also notice about a quarter of the way across the river, there's quite a big boil. And that suggests to me that there's a snag somewhere on the riverbed. It could be an old tree, it might even be an old car or a pram or something, or one of last year's weed beds. But there's something quite pronounced down there that's causing the water to boil up. And that means that if all else fails, locating that snag and fishing just behind it could well produce one or two barbel. It's quite a snaggy area anyway, this, and that does tend to mean that the barbel like it. You can just see it boiling up there, and there are probably fish hanging out behind that snag. This time around we're here to look at an absolutely classic swim. Yes, we're talking about the overhanging tree, and who better to comment on it than a man who's been fishing for, well, quite a long time. I'm talking of course about my old mate Pete Stone. Pete, overhanging trees, they're classic swims, aren't they? So,
yep.
So why?
Why? First of all, that they've got cover, so the fish feel safe under them. That there's things drop off the trees, you know, and caterpillars, bugs and everything. So it's a natural larder that you might say.
What you're saying is that the fish underneath a tree like this one, probably more so in the summer, would actually wait for food to drop into the water.
That's right. And I often wonder on those lines why we don't get why the maggot breeders don't give us green ones, because all the caterpillars are green. Well,
yes.
Not all of them, but most of them. So why don't they give us some green caterpillar?
Well,
some green.
Stoney, that is a very interesting point, and totally irrelevant to this piece, but I'm glad you raised it. But I'm going to battle on anyway.
Right.
Now, Pete, looking at a tree like this one, it's a nice looking tree. What sort of fish would you expect to find underneath that tree?
Chub, perch and roach.
Right.
If the bottom was suitable to them, barbel as well. But barbel, like the bottom for them have to be absolutely right. But roach and perch don't like bright light.
No.
You know, so that's shade under that tree all the time. Chub, well, as we have just said, because the food dropping off, and they feel safe under there, because chub are very shy fish, as you know.
Right.
But when they got that cover, they do feel safe and they lose a lot of their caution. But if you...
Well, I think within a few minutes, just judging by what you've said, I'm drooling with anticipation now, because I'm going to get a bite in a minute, aren't I? Or I hope I am. But there you have it, folks, overhanging trees. If you're on a stretch of river, any river anywhere, doesn't matter whether it's a big river or a small one like this, and you find an overhanging tree with a little bit of water underneath it, what we're saying is, fish it.